Hello, everybody. Allie Duzett here, and today we have a special treat because everybody has a special treat coming up on Monday. And I had not even known what was exactly going on, but just now we looked at these charts and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." So, Naomi, do you want to give us a little introduction to what we're looking at? And then I will pull up the charts and we're going to dig in to what is going on and how it's going to impact, I think, the entire world. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And I'm so excited for our conversation because these global events, anytime we have a full moon, a new moon, these are times when we're all collectively going through such a similar energy. And this particular upcoming full moon in Aquarius is a bigger deal. Like all of them are beautiful, all of them have meaning, some more so for certain people than others, but on a collective level, this is huge. And we'll also talk about how to tell if this particular full moon is even more impactful for you as an individual and like what to look for in your chart so you can know like, are you just having the collective experience that's already going to be very intense, or are you having an additional on top of that experience that either makes it easier or harder? So we have the full moon on Monday, August 19th. And so the sun is in Leo and the moon is in Aquarius, because with all full moons, we always have an exact opposition of the sun and moon. That's what makes it the fullness of the moon. So, yeah, thank you so much for pulling up this chart, Allie.
yeah, this is the sun, guys, over here, boop boop. And right down there is the moon, Leo and Aquarius at 27 degrees and 15 minutes on either end.
Yeah. So, this particular full moon has so many parts and pieces coming and going. We're going to take a minute just to kind of like lay them all out and then go over the meaning of what they are. So, with any full moon, we have sun and moon opposite, which is already creating this stretch between our identity, our ego, which is really the sun, our sense of who we are, and our inner world, our emotions, our private spaces, which is the moon. And so there's already this stretch. That's why people kind of act a little crazy during a full moon and the ER gets more busy, because we have this dichotomy of what seems to be contradictory happening at the same time, which can heighten our emotions. It can make them bigger, more full, like the full moon. It's in full bloom. We're fully seeing it because it's fully on the other side away from who we are. And so it's more visible. And like it's a little bit more common for women to go in labor during a full moon. Like the full moons affect us on a lot of levels. But with this particular full moon, I would say that the number one energy that is playing into this is, if you look over on the right-hand side of the chart, is the little symbol for Uranus in Taurus at 27 degrees. And the sun is at 27 degrees and the moon is at 27 degrees. So what that means is that because we're dealing with Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus, these are all fixed signs, all stubborn, all like immovable, all like they're going to do what they're going to do and you cannot change it. And that's called a T square when they're at a 90-degree angle with two of them. And then another, like one of them is at a peak point, the Uranus is at the apex, and then the sun and moon are opposing. So you have an opposition and two 90-degree angles makes what's called a T square in astrology. This is one of the most challenging aspects that exists in the way that the planets move. This is a time of extreme pressure, very, very strong questions being called up. And the questions are you going to continue as you began? And is this how you authentically feel about this? Because Uranus is bringing our authenticity to the surface. And it's looking straight at our ego and our sense of identity, and it's looking straight at our inner world and our emotions. And so this is a very change activated full moon where we are really not going to emerge out of this as we went into it. What else do you see, Allie?
Well, I was just thinking about how in mundane astrology, the moon, so in a personal astrology, the sun is like your core identity and the moon is like your emotions. But in mundane astrology, when you're dealing with nations,
Yes,
large group
yes,
of people, you have the sun representing the leader of a large group of people, and then the moon represents the actual people.
yes, yes.
When I'm looking at this, I'm seeing, okay, it looks to me like this is very supportive of some big kind of changes, or like it's going to draw the authenticity to the surface surrounding leaders and the people that they are technically responsible for who may or may not be thrilled about that.
Absolutely. So beautifully put. And as we were talking a little before we jumped on recording, what is so fascinating about this particular one, especially because Allie talks so much about the birth of America and the Pluto returns that's been happening, all of these things going on. The moon is exactly at the same point as America was when America was formed. The moon for this full moon is at 27 degrees 15 minutes, and the moon for America was at 27 degrees 10 minutes. It's only 5 astrological quote minutes. It's not actual minutes of time, but it's 5 astrological minutes difference. This is basically an exact conjunction. It is calling to the people of America, and America was born out of rebellion. This is a very rebellious energy for this particular full moon. And with, yes, the sun representing the leader and the moon representing the people, and Uranus coming and putting exact pressure on both of them, it is a time to reveal what has been hidden. It is a time to squeeze and like bring stuff up and out to the surface. I was doing some research about this, and this is, of course, not just with America, but globally. We have globally, there is in Venezuela, there is a leader that was just reelected that like very dictatorial leader, and the people are like, I don't really think so. And there's a lot of rebellion, especially from the younger people that have that strong Aquarius energy in their natal charts that are saying absolutely not. Like, we are not standing for this. And so they're ripe for something very significant exploding there. So it's not just, of course, America. We are not the center of the universe, but it is fascinating that this is directly referencing the America's natal chart, which is something that a lot of astrologers are looking at just because there's so much activity going on.
Yeah, that is, I mean, looking at this right here and right now, I mean, of course, we didn't even talk about this little section over here
Yes,
yet,
yes.
but like this is a huge call for humanity to be reevaluating our boundaries with our leaders, I would say. And
Yeah.
we're probably going to have a hefty dose of something surprising
Mhm.
that will trigger it.
Yeah. And with it being Taurus energy for the shocking, it's a very grounded energy. Of all the, like, Uranus is a very destabilizing energy. It's a very shake up, unexpected, shocking, from the future, technologically oriented energy, but it's in Taurus, which is like arguably the most grounded. It's a fixed earth sign. So it's very, very, very stable. And so this experience that we're all collectively having as Uranus moves very, very, very slowly through Taurus, the last time that Uranus was moving through Taurus, we were in the throes of the Great Depression. Excuse my voice. I don't know what's happening. And so we were in the throes of the Great Depression with that. And then, as we were talking as well, the last time that Uranus was at 27 degrees of Taurus was late 1941, early 1942, which is when the US entered World War II. And so, this particular energy of this stable energy of Taurus being shaken up and being activated is really powerful. Plus, we a few weeks ago we had that really, really intense conjunction with Mars and Uranus and Algol, which is a fixed star, which refers to the decapitation, just complete violence and very intense energies involving the head. And there was, at that same exact weekend, an assassination attempt on President Donald Trump. And so we had that energy. And Uranus is still conjunct Algol. That wasn't like a weekend energy. Algol is at 26 degrees, 10 minutes. And the orb is what it's called, like how far away something can get from it and still be impacting the energy, is a 2 degree and 10-minute orb. So we're extremely still within, well within that orb of Uranus, still kind of shaking hands and having its acquaintance energy and all of that with Algol. And so Uranus being such an outer planet, these transits that develop, these are more what we call soul growth lessons because they take months and months or even years of time of perfecting that energy. It's not like the sun and the moon that just kind of whiz around pretty quickly. But Uranus has been sitting in this space for quite a while.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I think, thank you for mentioning that because I think it's important to realize like, will some shocking event take place on Monday? You know, I would actually think that probably for many of us in our personal lives, there may be some kind of something, but will we see a huge disaster on the national scene or on the global scene? Maybe, maybe not, but we're playing with the long game.
Yes,
What
very
we're
much.
doing
Yeah.
is like we're having this little reset in that moment with this. I'm like pointing at it, but you can't see. But these moves right here, this is a big reset. And we're gonna be seeing the impacts of this playing out over time, which I have two quick thoughts about that. First off, I wanted to mention to everybody that full moons, so you get a full moon in every sign every year, and sometimes two, depending on the movement of the sun and the moon. But where in that sign the full moon takes place is going to be different every year. So you get like one and maybe two full moons in Aquarius every year, but the last time that we would have had one at 27 degrees of Aquarius, that's not like it's been a while. It's been like a long while. It is not, this is a notable conjunction, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. Yeah,
Uh,
this is not regular. Very, very excellent point.
yeah, just to be clear, because we have full moons all the time, and so but this one really is pretty unusual, especially in the context of the globe's primary superpower, right?
Yeah.
The other thought that I had is that this is our last full moon before our next series of eclipses. Okay, so we had our big eclipse moment in April. Well, we have another one coming up on September 17th. Well, it
Mhm.
depends on where you are, what time zone, September 17th or September 18th, because it's like, right on the date line, basically, depending. But this is a final full moon trigger on everyone in the whole world, but also especially America, the global superpower. And this is our like big final thing before our next series of eclipses, which just seems really, really notable to me, especially because we're having three eclipses. Um, kind of. We're having a partial lunar eclipse on September 17th, a solar eclipse on October the 2nd, and then a super almost lunar eclipse, which will not be a true one, but it will be like so close on October 17th. And all of that is mere weeks away from Election Day.
Yeah,
So this just to add to how interesting and unique this full moon is going to be for everybody. I mean, I think those are things just to have boiling in the back of your mind, I guess.
for sure. Absolutely. I love it. I want to be sure to cover a couple of the other things that are going on that are not necessarily directly like involving the sun and the moon. But we have Venus is at 18 degrees, and she has just recently, like the hours before this, was exactly opposing Saturn at 17 degrees of Pisces. So just a little bit before this, she was at 17 degrees, 28 minutes, and there was an exact opposition. This energy is still considered an exact opposition. Well, just about a half a degree away from being exact. So it's a very strong opposition with Venus and Saturn. And then, as if that wasn't enough fun, we have Mars up in Gemini at 19 degrees that is also creating a T-square. It's not quite as exact as the sun and moon and Uranus, but this is still another T-square. So we have a fixed T-square because of the sun and the moon and Uranus in the fixed signs. And then we have a mutable T-square with Venus and Mars and Saturn. And what this is we have masculine and feminine energies in a tension with each other because masculine is Mars and feminine is Venus. And then we have Saturn, which is like a reckoning of sorts. It's the teacher, it's the did you do all your chores? Have you followed the order that you agreed to? Are you in integrity? How's your karma? How's the timing of this? And it can feel like a very harsh energy. It's not harsh, but it feels harsh when we want to move forward, when we want to do it our way, when we want to skip steps. And so Venus is having this, she's just on the other side of it. So she's just had this moment to pause and go, is this what I want? Is the relationship I'm in the way that I want it to be? And so all of this is culminating and blooming at the time of this full moon. She's reevaluating a lot because she just had this quote conversation with Saturn as she was just opposing Saturn hours before this. And she's now thinking like, is this going to serve me? Do I want to choose a different path? And with Mars in the mix, there's a lot of fuel to this. There's a lot of intensity. There's a lot of tension of just do it, just dive in, just make a choice, just jump, especially because Mars was just barely conjunct Jupiter days before this. It was on Wednesday that Mars and Jupiter were exactly conjunct, creating this ignition point and this fueling and this moving forward. And so a mutable T square is more like a dance. It's more like things just kind of flowing and always moving. It's not quite as intense as a fixed T square, but it is a you're not going to come out of this the way that you entered. So we have that coming and going in multiple areas.
Oh my goodness. I was just thinking, you said it's not as bad as that, but for people with only mutable signs in their chart, I would say that's like my big butt kicker right now. And
Hmm.
my chart is like 90% mutable, like almost everything I got is
Yes.
a mutable thing. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I feel this really much. But if you have a really fixed sign energy, then you're gonna feel that one a lot more.
And I've actually got both. So if you have anything at the mutable signs around the 16 to 19 degree, 20 degrees, if you're anywhere, and that mutable signs is going to be the Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So if you have anything in your chart at all, especially a personal planet, a more core planet in that 16 degree to 20 degree range, you're going to really be feeling this particular T square extra pronounced. And then if you have anything in your chart in the fixed signs, which is going to be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius at about 24 degrees, because this is so strong, maybe 25 degrees until 29 degrees. If you have anything in that range, that is going to be heavily activated during this full moon. Fun fact, I have my natal Uranus is at 26 and a half degrees of Scorpio. So I am right in the middle of my Uranus opposition, which is a once in a lifetime transit. And this is like bam, like lighting it all up. And while I have a ton, I'm a Virgo moon and a Virgo and I'm a Sagittarius, my mutable placements aren't quite being as activated by this particular T square because they're just really early or really late in the sign. And so it's not quite at this exact point. But yeah, that T square with the sun and moon and Uranus is all up in my business. And so I'm like, I am so curious how Monday is going to go for me personally, because this will be 10 out of 10, very impactful with the very on the table thing that I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Ah, okay. So I want to talk about one more thing.
Yes.
Well, like two more things, but so we have this grand trine happening.
Mhm.
No, it's pretty loose. You use a much smaller orb for.
I'm very tight, especially when it comes to chart points like the nodal path and Pluto. I am not much more generous than 3 degree orb for Pluto.
Okay. I don't know. I'll have to figure out how I can edit the aspects for my software so that it doesn't show that. Let's see. Okay, so that would negate that yacht as well.
But we also have Mercury and the Sun that were just conjunct on Sunday, the day before this full moon, and they're still very much conjunct. I mean, they're a degree and 15 minutes apart. And so Mercury, our mind, has just re-entered into Leo a few days before this and is going back over those Leo themes as Mercury is moving backwards and encountering this squaring with Uranus. And so our mind is also having that like very intense and opposing the sun. So it's still very much in that T square as well.
Yeah, well, and with Mercury in retrograde and in Leo, I think
Hmm.
it's going to invite everybody on the whole planet to be rethinking about choices that we've made in the past, especially ones that may not have been authentic to ourselves
A hundred
and may
percent.
have not been in our best interest. You know, it's a really interesting dynamic between Leo and Aquarius because Leo really needs to be put first. Like it
Hmm.
needs to be in the spotlight, and Aquarius really needs to put everybody else first to a large degree. Like it's very into the same both Leo and uh Aquarius really prize like authenticity and being their true self in public. But Aquarius is going to be a lot more humanitarian minded and a lot more into um, world,
Yeah.
ending hunger, like all of that kind of thing. And Leo is really more into like ending its own hunger. I don't know, which is
Yeah.
fine. And we need both.
100%.
The human needs both. But I think that this exact dynamic is really going to have us thinking like, uh-oh, maybe I should not have overextended myself in the service of others. Maybe I made some weird decisions um in how I tried to serve other people that were not really true to me. And now I have to rethink how I'm going to take another step forward that's much truer to myself.
Yeah.
And where this is going to get interesting, I mean, like, it's going to be really interesting on a personal level as we all deal with that, but also on like the global level, when you think of these like key individuals in placements of power, in like, the leader of um, oh my gosh, come on, brain. Like the Department of Education or like the Department of Treasury. Like when you get individuals like that have a lot of power and a lot of influence who suddenly have a thing show up and say, okay, buddy, did you make the right choice? Were you motivated by the right reasons? Here's an opportunity to change course. Are you going to take it? Are you not going to take it? So we're all going to have that experience, but the way that each individual responds to those experiences, some individuals are going to make choices that are going to impact a lot of people.
Yes. Yes. So, so well said. It's so true. This energy is going to play out very interesting. I personally, I'm raising one of my children. He's 14. He is a Leo sun and an Aquarius moon and an Aquarius stellium. And so just observing his energy, there's going to be a lot of that activated. And for him, it shows up really beautifully, actually, the balance between being the center of attention and genuinely pondering on and cultivating other people and their needs and all of that. And so there is that potential, but with Uranus in the mix, I think it will just be very, very activated. Any babies born on Monday are going to be fascinating. I always think that whenever there's a lot going on in a chart, that's when us astrologers look at a chart, we go, whoa.
Ah, so
Yeah.
one thing that really stood out to me when I put this chart in the middle and make
Hmm.
it all about
Hmm.
Monday.
Hmm.
This is America's natal sun. I
Hmm.
mean, I just think that this is really interesting that America has its natal sun, Jupiter, Mercury, part of fortune, and North Node, which is in Leo. So even though this is not tight, I mean, I would say that the nodal path is still kind of being activated in some kind of way because it's happening in the same axis.
I can
Um,
get behind that, especially since transiting Pluto is about to go across the South Node here in a few years, which is going to be definitely something you and I will be talking about.
yes, for sure. For sure. Well, I was just thinking like this is a really interesting bunch of stuff for America's natal chart to have in the
Yes,
eighth.
yes. And this is the eighth house when you're standing in Washington, D.C., which definitely is worth looking at, but it's also, it will change depending on where you're physically standing.
Right, but like from the perspective of Washington, D.C. and this
Hmm.
full moon taking place like exact the
Yes.
natal full moon when you're standing in Washington, D.C. on Monday at 2:26 p.m. and looking up like what we have is a big call of transformation
Yeah.
on a core level that's going to impact our money. The way that we are rethinking everything that's led us up to this point, uh, more of our money and our overall destiny. Like it's all in that
Yeah.
cave of it's time to like have a big shakeup and prune what isn't working so that new growth can show up.
Yeah. It's interesting that the US's natal Mercury is retrograde. I don't think I've quite noticed that before. It
I
was a
was thinking that.
rethinking, it was a revisiting of Cancerian things, which is very nurturing and home life and all of that. It was a time when it was like, you know what, we're gonna go back and we're gonna, and obviously America wasn't formed like this day. Like there was events that led up to it, but this was like the birth of America, the moment that this is the energy that was going on at the time that it was born. So I find that very interesting, especially since we're in Mercury retrograde with this.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like Mercury is I don't know. I haven't paid super tons of attention to this Mercury retrograde, but it looks like in a few days it'll be in alignment with America's natal Mercury retrograde.
No, because it's Cancer and Leo. It's not going to make it back
Oh my
that
gosh,
far.
you're
Yeah.
right. My brain,
It's
like,
so
is
easy for
it?
the brain to be
No, is it
calculating
just
one
our
thing and then
brain?
forgetting another.
Yeah, thank you. Woo, just kidding, guys. Okay. But still interesting. No.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this Mercury retrograde is it's interesting with it starting in Virgo, which is where one of the home signs for Mercury, and now it's back into Leo. And so we're very much in a theme for the rest of August of watch what you're saying, and is your ego coming out before your words, or are your words coming through a heavy filter of ego, which is always something to be mindful of, but it's very pronounced for the rest of this month.
Yeah. Okay, so before we wrap it up, do you have any particular words of wisdom for all of us as we're heading into this energy? Best practices, how are we going to rock it and
Mhm.
make sure that it works out the best for us?
Yeah, excellent question. Because we're dealing with such intense energies, these are going to overpower even the strongest of wills. And so it's really worth examining your attachment to things going the way that you think that they should, because something is going to change over the next week. Something is going to come out different. Now, different is not good, different is not bad. I mean, it could end up being great, it could end up being terrible. This could be one of the worst weekends of your life, it could be one of the best weekends of your life. There's nothing here that inherently is saying this is going to be awful or this is going to be amazing. We just know it's going to be intense and it's going to create some change. And so I feel like every time I look at the transits, there's always this gentle, loving invitation to remind us that we are not in charge, that it has nothing to do with you and it has everything to do with you. And getting the ends of that correct is really, I think, where we find our peace. And when we have them flipped is when we suffer. And so this is very much a an event of letting go of the wheel, truly like going to God in humility and saying like how like I will give this to you. I'm going to sacrifice this, putting things on the altar, being willing to let go of especially the things that we're holding on to the most tightly. And often we don't even know what those are until it's being pried out of our hands. And so just being willing and ready to see that there's probably something that you've been clutching to in your life, that the universe is going to gently say, hey, sweetheart, it's time to let that go because there's better things coming. There's always better things coming. And to just remember like, I believe that we are creatures of eternal progression, and that can imply that there is something magnificent and wonderful unfolding for us that we can count on.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's really true that we're going to have to let go of what we thought we wanted and see what shows up instead. I have to tell a super quick story.
Please do.
So, so I started high school on my 14th birthday, which at the time I felt like was pretty significant, but I didn't really have a reason to think that because I didn't know anything about astrology, but I was like, this is really important. And I had prayed and prayed that I would be put in all the right classes for that first year of high school, and my schedule was just awful, and I hated it. And they couldn't change it, and I was upset, but I was like, fine, I guess it's God's will for me to have the worst schedule. The next year shows up, my sophomore year, and once again, I pray that I will have exactly the right schedule, and 100% of my friends get put in advanced engineering, a 2 hour class where they all worked on like architecture and stuff like that. And I did not get in, which did not make sense because I certainly qualified for it more than many of my friends that did get in. And I was put in remedial tech, where we had an armed security guard because all of the gang members would play chicken with the bandsaw, which was like very terrifying. Okay. So my schedule that year was also horrific. I was terrified for my life, literally. And it was a disaster. And then the next year, I prayed for my schedule to be right again. And once again, it was awful. But that January, I went to church and came home and like felt like I walked into a wall, and God said, you have to be graduated in 4 months from now. Like you are going to walk and you are going to BYU and you need to move 2,000 miles away from your parents. And like, you're going to sort this out and you're going to do it right now. And I was like, okay. And I turned around and told my parents I was going to move out, which they were not thrilled about. And when I went to meet with my guidance counselor, it turned out that because of all of these horrific years of remedial tech and all the gang members, and my armed security guard and all of this stuff, like all of that I had to slog through had made it so I had completed all the credit requirements and I was able to graduate. And if I had not done that, if I had gotten into the advanced engineering class, if I had had all of the good classes that I really thought I wanted, I would not have been able to do what had to be done to get out of there in 4 months. And I was talking about this with my son. He just started eighth grade yesterday as of this recording, and his schedule is not what he wanted, but I just had to tell him, like, guess what? Sometimes your schedule, like in your perception, your schedule is the worst and you hate it and you're terrified for your life. And sometimes it is the right schedule for you. And you just have to trust that you don't know the full story, um, because God has a bigger timeline than you. So all of that is kind of like the backstory because just last night I was having a total breakdown and I was crying and crying and I'm like, I'm gonna cry again. Don't do it, Allie. Cry later. Okay. But I was just crying about the schedule of my current life and a bunch of stuff that's going on that I was like, this is the worst. I was like, God, how, come on. Like, seriously, how come everything is lining up like this when this is the worst? And I felt like God just said, hey, don't you remember? Like, you just gave your son a lecture about how sometimes you need to take remedial tech. And, like, sorry, Allie, like, you're in remedial tech right now, but can you just trust that it's going to be fine? Like, can you just trust that, like, it's all lining up exactly right? And I think that's kind of the big message for all of us right now is like, your schedule, you may not be thrilled with it in this moment, and it may get worse before it gets better. But can we trust that God is just really smarter than us? He just really actually is. And what if it could be safe to trust that even if things feel like they're falling apart, even if they feel like they're the super worst, that actually there is a greater rhyme and reason to it than we comprehend. And we just have to like hang in there. You just got to show up and like build your stupid birdhouse with all the gang members and just hang it, just do it, just get the job done and trust that it's just going to wake up. You're going to wake up one day and things are going to start falling into place.
Yeah, so beautiful. Oh, I love it so much. Yes, exactly all of that. And it's all going to work out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you guys for being here. Check out Naomi Fox right now. I'll put her links below. She runs illuxology.com. I think it's now
Dot
lightfilled.co,
co.
which
Hmm.
is awesome. So, okay, I'll need the new links to
Yeah.
put on there. But she teaches astrology and human design, and you can get a free birth chart run at her site.
Mhm.
So then what it will show up with a list of all of your placements, your planet placements. So you can say, oh, I have Venus in Sagittarius. And you might not know what that means, but you can Google it.
Mhm.
And then you can know, like, she said everything in Sagittarius in this area is going to get triggered by that T
Mhm.
square. So that will be very helpful to you. And she's also on Facebook. And her group, Light-Filled Astrology and Human Design, is so good and everyone loves it. And everyone's learning a whole lot in there, and it's really good. So thank you again, Naomi, and hang in there, guys. We're in for it, but it's going to be fun.
Thank you so much.